The morning light filtered softly through the thin curtains of In's temporary apartment, casting long, pale stripes across the floor. She stirred reluctantly, body aching from the previous day's marathon rehearsal. Her fingers brushed against the brushes she had meticulously laid out the night before. Each one was a soldier in the quiet war she had been fighting, the war of proving herself in a world she had only glimpsed from afar. She slipped her bitter instant coffee, the flavor grounding her. Seoul had already begun to feel less alien, but the language still tangled in her tongue like stubborn vines. She whispered the few phrases she'd memorized again, Annie Inghesia, Gams Hamnida, as if saying them could summon confidence. Today, rehearsals were longer, more demanding. The arena's doors loomed in the distance, massive and imposing. Every footstep on the polished concrete felt amplified, echoing through the quiet, morning streets. In adjusted the strap of her kit, inhaling sharply. This was the life she had fought for, yet the shakes felt higher than ever. Upon arriving at the sealed dome, the world erupted into controlled chaos. Crew members ran in every direction, voices overlapping in Korean and English. Ropes dangled from the ceiling, light rings swayed above, and screens flickered with testing visuals. In's senses became a storm, overwhelming, electric, and intoxicating. Hannah appeared, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp but encouraging. "In, today is critical. Jungkook is tired. Pay attention. Anticipate, don't wait." In noted, heart pounding. She followed Hannah through the chaz of corridors, nothing the small details, a scuff on the floor, the placement of makeup stations, the tiny towel left folded beside a chair. Every overworked element could cause disaster in a performance of this scale. When Jungkook entered, In caught the slight slump of his shoulders immediately. His hoodie hung loosely, concealing the fatigue in his frame. His hand trembled faintly as he adjusted the cuffs of his jacket. It was subtle, almost invisible, but In saw it. "Good morning," she said softly, hoping not to startle him. He gave a faint nod, voice low and tired. "Morning." As she began preparing his skin, she noticed the dark shadows under his eyes, the tiny lines at the corners that were invisible in polished music vitals. He wasn't just a star, he was human, fragile under the stage lights. Jungkook's internal thoughts drifted briefly. Another new face. Not star-stuck, not intrusive. Observant. Too observant, yet somehow steady. Maybe she'll last longer than the others. Rehearsals began in full force. The music thumped against the walls, bass vibrating in In's chest. She moved swiftly, fixing foundation, smoothing blush, adjusting hair, hands flying like they were guided by instinct. Yet mistakes were inevitable. A trainee bumped into the kit, scattering brushes. In's heart jumped. She knelt, collecting them with precise fingers, muttering under her breath, "Focus. Just breath." Jungkook noticed the flurry and for the first time that day paused mid-line in the rehearsal. His gaze lingered on her hands, steady, calm, even in chaos. Something in him loosened, though he didn't speak it. Later, during a break-in found Jungkook alone by the stage's edge. The arena was empty, chairs stacked neatly, lights dimmed to a soft blue. He didn't notice her at first. "You work too hard," she said gently, almost whispering. He looked up, startled, then let a faint smile appear. "You don't have to say that," he replied. "I can see it," she said simply. "No one notices these little things about you." He remained silent, letting her words linger. There was no pressure, no expectations, only quiet acknowledgement, something rare in his world. The next day, In arrived at the sealed dome before sunrise. The city was quiet, streets slick with last night's rain, neon signs reflecting off puddles like fragments of a tomb. She tugged her jacket tighter and adjusted her mask, still conscious of being foreign, still aware of every glance that lingered a second too long. Inside, the arena buzzed differently than yesterday. The technicians had begun rehearsing complex light patterns, and the air smelled of hot metal and perfume. Every footstep she took seemed to echo like a drumbeat in her chest. Hannah met her at the entrance. In C today you handled Jungkook alone for the first rehearsal. He's tired, yes, but concentrated. Do not hesitate. Think ahead. In swallowed hard. Alone. For the first time she felt the weight of responsibility press against her shoulders. I can do this, she whispered, gripping her makeup kit like a lifeline. She approached Jungkook's dressing room cautiously. He was already seated before the mirror, Arbid's phone in hand. His posture was impeccable, yet the exhaustion radiated like a shadow around him. The dark circles under his eyes were deeper today, and his usually bright skin seemed pallid under the stark lights. "Morning," she said softly, setting down her kit. He removed his arbids slowly, his eyes meeting hers for the briefest moment, wary, polite, and calculating. "Morning," he replied. She began her work, blending foundation, checking skin tone, adjusting a light touch of concealer under his eyes. Her hands moved with confidence, but her heart raced with each subtle motion. "Heck, notices everything," she thought. And he did. Jungkook's pod drifted, her hands are careful, precise. She notices the tremor in my fingers before anyone else. Calm, patient. I wonder if she knows what she's seeing. No one ever notices. Halfway through the preparation, a trainee ran in, spilling bottle of makeup remover across the counter. Brushes rolled, pellets clattered, and a faint smell of alcohol filled the room. In's heart raced. She moved quickly, gathering everything before it touched Jungkook's clean uniform. He didn't flinch. Instead, he observed, lips pressed thin. "You always move so fast," he said quietly. "Faster is safer," she replied, blinking rapidly to hide her nerves. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken understanding. Jungkook's eyes softened, just enough, before he turned back to the mirror. Later, when rehearsals began and stayed backstage, kit at the ready, she noticed him faltering mid-tour, muscles tense, lips pressed in silent concentration. She fetched water and placed it near when during a break. He glanced down briefly, a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes, fleeting yet enough. The crew was unaware, the media coverage, the press photos, the adoring fans, none of them saw this small, intimate exchange. But In felt it, and she realized she wanted to protect this quiet, unseen part of him. No one should have to carry this alone, she thought. After rehearsals, In ventured into the streets near the venue. Seoul was alive in a quainter way at night. Street food vendors smoked skewers of fish and chicken. Neon signs buzzed faintly above, and people moved with a rhythm she was still learning to match. She tried speaking in broken Korean at a vendor, being tteokbokki, and received a warm smile in return. The small victories, ordering food correctly, understanding a bus route, learning a local phrase, became her silent trophies. Yet, even in these small joys, her mind wandered to Jungkook. The exhaustion etched on his face, the weight of expectations pressing down on him. She couldn't help thinking about what it meant to live under such constant pressure. Returning to the arena the next day, In noticed a subtle shift. Jungkook lingered by the stage longer than usual, his hoodie hanging heavy, eyes unfocused. "He's slipping through the cracks," she realized. Hannah noticed too, briefly. "Don't interfere," she said, almost apologetically. "Company doesn't like attachments forming." Not yet, but In couldn't ignore it. She found herself leaving small, unnoticed gestures, adjusting a color, leaving a bottle of water at his side, tucking a note under a music sheet. "Don't forget to eat." Jungkook's pov, the girl leaves little things. Notes, water, a glance that lasts longer than necessary. I don't know why, but it helps. No one else notice. Maybe she sees me. Maybe that's dangerous. That night, back in her small apartment, In collapsed on the bed. Her feet throbbed, her arms ached, and her mind replayed every small details from the day. The spilled bottle, Jungkook's tremor, the fleeting smile when he noticed her water bottle. She realized something startling. This wasn't just a job anymore. She was invested, emotionally, mentally. The idol she had admired from ever wasn't just a celebrity, he was human, fragile, exhausted, and somehow in the quiet moments she felt responsible for him. I came here to prove myself, she thought, but maybe I came here to see him. Outside, Seal's lights glimmered through the window. Somewhere, the city whispered secrets of lonely performers, exhausted dreamers, and those who quietly watched over them. In closed her eyes, letting herself carry both exhaustion and hope together. The next morning, In woke to the familiar hum of Seal's early city life. Through the thin curtains, the pale light of dawn fell across her small apartment. Her body ached in places she hadn't known were sore, shoulders stiff from carrying heavy kits, feet bruised from running through the rehearsal halls, wrists sore from endless makeup applications. Yet her mind was sharper than ever. Each night she lay awake, recalling every brush stroke, every observed expression of Jungkook. His exhaustion lingered in her memory, as vivid as if she were still backstaged. By the time she arrived at the Seal Dome, the staff were already moving with practiced urgency, and feel the weight of her responsibility press against her chest. Today, she was no longer a helper. She was a bridge between Jungkook and the world of performance. Hannah greeted her quickly. He's pushing himself too hard. Don't let him skip breaks. You understand, and nodded, swallowing the lump of worry in her throat. Inside the dressing room, Jungkook was already seated, reviewing choreography videos on his table. His hoodie sleeves were rolled slightly higher, revealing faint bruises along his forearms from a minor rehearsal accident. In's chest tightened, no one else had noticed. This is why I came, she thought, to see, to notice. As rehearsals began, Jungkook moved across the stage with his usual precision, but In could see the cracks. A slight stumble in a step he had performed flawlessly hundreds of times, a hand lingering a second too long on his knee as if holding himself together, a yawn he quickly swallowed. She prepared his makeup quietly, adjusting for suite and stage lights, hands steady despite the fear creeping in. Every subtle movement he made, she mirrored with her care, a brush, a dab, a whispered reminder, don't forget to breathe it. Jungkook's paw drifted again, rare and fleeting. She notices the tremor in my hands. She notices the shadow in my eyes. I'm not sure why it matters, but it does. Strange to have someone see men and not recall. Maybe I need that. During a short break, the two ended up alone backstage. In settled on a nearby stool, Kit closed beside her. Jungkook bent over against the wall, hoodie drawn over his head, shoulders tense. "Why do you care so much about my fatigue?" he asked, voice quiet but probing. In blinked, started. "Because someone has to," she said softly. "You can't carry this alone. Even stirs have limit." He stared at her, expression unreadable. Then, almost faintly, he smiled, a curve of his lips that barely touched his eyes, but enough to melt the coldness of his usual composure. Maybe this is why she's here, he thought. Not for the job, not for the fame, just to notice. The day stretched on with relentless rehearsals. It moved tirelessly between stations, adjusting microphones, fixing sweet, damp hair, blending foundation under lights quirks. A stylist who always hummed, a trainee who dropped brushes when nervous, a sound engineer obsessed with perfect pitch. Each interaction gave her a deeper understanding of the ecosystem of stardom, the delicate ballet behind the glamour. She also began learning subtle Korean idioms, laughing quietly when she mispronounced them, earning smiles from the crew. These small victories reminded her why she had fought so hard to reach this world, not for fame but to belong. Late in the evening, after the final rehearsal, the arena emptied, leaving only the faint hum of electronics. Jungkook sat on the edge of the stage, hands clasped loosely, face fixed on nothing. Approached carefully, carrying a small thermos of tea she had prepared herself. Placing it beside him, she murmured, "It's cold outside, but this will help. Just for a moment." He glanced up, eyebrows lifted, surprised. "You made this?" "Yes." "Consider it a professional courtesy," she said, smiling faintly. He laughed softly, shaking his head. "Professional courtesy or care, both," she admitted. For the first time in days, Jungkook let himself lean back, relax. The tension in his shoulders lessened slightly, just enough. Their eyes met, and no words were necessary. An understanding passed silently between them. Returning to her apartment, dropped on her bed, exhaustion settling into her bones. Yet a strange warmth lingered in her chest. She had not only survived another exhausting day but had connected, however subtly, with the person she had once idolized from afar. She thought of her journey, the years of rejection, long nights studying and practicing, the small jobs that barely paid, the self-doubt she had carried like a stone in her chest. All of it had led this quiet recognition, a glimpse of vulnerability in someone the world only saw as untouchable. "I am exactly where I need to be," she whispered, and somewhere in the dim, blue-lit Seoul night, Jungkook sat under the same stars, thinking of the quiet girl who saw him when no one else did. The next day the arena was alive with light and sound, even before rehearsal officially began. The stage lights, though not fully powered, cast long beams across the empty seats, creating patterns that shifted with each movement of the ropes above. In entered quietly, kit in hand, feeling the familiar rush of nerves and anticipation. Today's rehearsal would be the most exhausting, yet Jungkook's schedule included a full dance sequence, vocal warm-ups, camera blocking, and a media shoot afterwards. The demands were relentless and In could already feel the tension buzzing through the air. She found Jungkook seated at the edge of the stage, stretching his legs mechanically, face calm but distant. His shoulders were tight, lips pressed in a straight line. A faint line of fatigue traced the corners of his eyes. In hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. "Morning," she said softly. He looked up, offering a slight nod. "Morning." Her hands moved automatically, preparing his makeup, adjusting the subtle contouring that would hold under the harsh stage lights. She noticed the slight tremor in his fingers as he ran through choreography steps in his mind, the same subtle signs she had observed in previous days. "He's pushing too hard," she thought, adjusting the foundation under his eyes with extra care. Mid-rehearsal, Jungkook faltered slightly in a complicated sequence. The choreographer shouted corrections and the dancers around him hesitated, unsure how to respond. Noticed his fingers clutching the edge of the stage to steady himself. Without thinking, she handed him a water bottle, her eyes meeting his. He froze, then allowed himself a small sip. For a brief moment he felt a connection, a lifeline amidst the relentless pace. Who notices these things, he thought. No one except her. This small act, unnoticed by the world, gave him the strength to push through the next set of movements. Rehearsal continued with relentless energy. Crew members moved like clockwork, shouting instructions in rapid Korean, adjusting lights, microphones, and props. Navigated the chaos with growing confidence, her hands steady, her mind sharp. She corrected smudges, adjusted clothing, and ensured Jungkook's hair remained flawless despite the sweat and heat. The other staff began noticing her efficiency. Hannah gave a small approving nod. A few of the trainees smiled at her encouragement, grateful for her quiet guidance. and realized she was becoming part of the backstage ecosystem, not just an observer. During a brief break, In sat on the edge of the stage, brushing stray strands of hair from Jungkook's face. Her thoughts drifted to her journey, the long nights in Mumbai, the rejections, the small jobs she had taken to keep practicing, the language struggles in Korea. She understood what it meant to fight quietly, persist through exhaustion, and still show up for your dream. Maybe that's why I connect with him, she thought. We've both been fighting, just in different arenas. She glanced at Jungkook, who was now sitting quietly, shoulders slumped slightly, eyes half closed. He was strong, talented, admired by thousands, but she saw the human beneath the stage persona, vulnerable, tired, yet resilient. As rehearsals ended, In stayed behind to help clean up the makeup station. She noticed Jungkook still seated at the stage edge, looking at the empty seats. She approached, carrying a small towel to wipe the sweat from his neck. "You've been pushing yourself too hard," she said softly. He looked up, surprised that she had noticed. "I have to," he said quietly. "There's no other choice." "There's always a choice," she replied, "even small ones. Rest, breaths, let someone notice." For the first time, Jungkook allowed himself to lean back, closing his eyes briefly. The weight of expectations, the pressure to perform, and the loneliness he carried seemed lighter in her presence. "She sees me," he thought, "and she doesn't judge. Maybe that's what I need." Returning to her apartment that night, In reflected on the day. Exhaustion passed heavily on her body, yet her mind was alert, replaying every gesture, every expression. She thought about Jungkook, the small exchanges that no one else notices, a shared glance, a whispered word, a water bottle handed just in time. Her past struggles, the nights she had carried over failed auditions, the days she had begged for opportunities, the small victories that felt monumental in her own world. Now, seeing Jungkook struggle, she understood that even the brightest stars carried burdens invisible to the crowd. "I came here to learn, to prove myself," she thought. "But maybe I also came here to care, to notice, to be part of someone's story in a way no one else can." Outside, Seoul's neon light shimmered through the window, echoing the quiet battles fought in the heart of the city. In closed her eyes, letting herself rest, carrying exhaustion, empathy, and a fragile hope all at once. The arena lights blazed brighter than usual that afternoon, even though no audience had arrived yet. Rehearsals were running long, a full simulation of the concert with cameras, lights, and choreography running in real time. Sweat glistened on Jungkook's forehead, his hoodie clinging damply to his back. Every moment, every note, every step demanded perfection, and the pressure weighed visibly on him. In watched from the side, heart tightening. She had seen exhaustion before, yes, but this was different. It was as though the weight of the entire industry pressed down on his shoulders, bending him ever so slightly towards collapse. "He can't keep this pace," she thought, clutching her brush tightly. "Someone has to notice." During a particular complex dance sequence, Jungkook missed a step. His foot slipped slightly on the slick stage floor, and for a moment time seemed to pause. The choreographer's sharp voice cut through the air. "Jungkook, again." He straightened, forcing a smile, but In could see the tension in his jaw, the quickening of his breath. His hands, which usually moved with flawless precision, trembled just slightly as he lifted his microphone. In took a careful step forward, quietly adjusting his collar, smoothing the sweat on his forehead with a gentle hand. The touch was fleeting but grounding, like an anchor in a storm. During a short break, Jungkook slumped onto the edge of the stage, closing his eyes. In approached, carrying a bottle of water and a small towel. "You need to rest," she said softly, almost as if speaking too loudly would shatter the fragile moment. He opened his eyes slowly, gaze meeting hers, a mixture of surprise, exhaustion, and something softer that he rarely showed anyone. "I can't," he murmured. "I have to keep going. One slip, and it all falls apart." In sat beside him on the stage edge, careful to maintain just enough professional distance. "One moment of rest doesn't erase your effort," she said gently. "It makes you stronger for the next step. Even stars have limits." Jungkook. He let out a quiet breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Maybe she's right, he thought. Maybe letting someone see this doesn't mean weakness. The silence stretched, comfortable yet heavy. He noticed a tiny bruise on his forearm from a previous rehearsal move. She hesitated, then lightly pressed her fingers to check the swelling, not to poke around, but to ensure he hadn't injured himself seriously. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she whispered. His voice was barely audible. "I've never had someone notice like this before." In's chest tightened. She realized in that moment that the idol she had admired from afar was not untouchable. He was human, scared, tired, and longing for understanding just like anyone else. Over the next hour In stayed close, anticipating his needs silently, offering water, handing tissues, adjusting wardrobe, leaving small notes tucked near his music sheets, simple phrases like "breath," "you were doing well," "don't forget to eat." Jungkook noticed. He couldn't ignore it. A small smile flickered on his lips when he saw one of her notes. "You were cherished by so many people more than you know, and still you keep pushing yourself for their smiles. Please look after yourself too. Your well-being matters." He didn't say it aloud, but his fingers lingered over the note longer than necessary. The unspoken exchange, her care, his quiet acknowledgement became their private language, invisible to the world, but deeply meaningful to both. Back in her apartment and collapsed onto her bed, every muscle itching, yet her mind refused to quiet. She replayed the day in vivid detail. Jungkook's faltering step, the tiny bruise, the fleeting smile he gave when she handed him water. She thought of her own struggles, the years of rejections, the nights spent wondering if she'd make it, the small victories she had to fight tooth and nail to achieve. Now, seeing Jungkook, she realized how universal exhaustion and pressure were regardless of fame or talent. "We are not so different," she whispered to herself. "Just two people carrying our dreams in different airness." Outside, Seoul shimmered in noon and rain reflections. In let herself rest, knowing she had not only survived another exhausting day, but had made a real difference, unseen by the world, yet profound in its impact. For the first time, she understood. Being behind the stage lights didn't mean being invisible. Sometimes, seeing the person behind the performance mattered more than any applause. The next rehearsal began in a gray, misty morning. Seoul's light rain blurred the skyline, and the arena smelled faintly of damp concrete and stage polish. In arrived earlier than usual, carrying her kit and thermos of tea. Each day felt heavier than the last, yet somehow the weight no longer crushed her. It had become a rhythm she could follow, a rhythm of observation, care, and quiet courage. Jungkook entered the room late, his hoodie drawn tight, hair damp from running in the cold rain outside. He avoided eye contact at first, shoulders hunched, eyes wary. In noticed his hesitation, the faint tension in his hands as he tugged at the cuffs of his hoodie. He's always been composed, she thought. But this is real. Today, she was in charge of preparing him entirely on her own. No backup from Hannah. No safety net. Her heartbeat quickened, but she let her hands move with practiced precision. Foundation, contouring, eyebrows, each motion a quiet reassurance, a subtle act of care. Jungkook remained silent, letting her work, though she could feel his eyes on her occasionally. There was a hesitancy there, something she hadn't seen before, curiosity, maybe even trust. During a brief pause, Jungkook slumped onto the edge of the stage. He didn't reach for water, didn't speak. In approached cautiously, kneeling slightly to be at his level. "You've been pushing yourself too hard," she said softly. He didn't respond immediately. His hands twitched, unconsciously fidgeting with a strand of hair. After a long pause, he murmured, voice barely above the echoing silence of the empty arena, "You notice more than anyone else ever has." Her chest tightened. She didn't know what to say. She simply nodded, handing him a bottle of water and a small towel. "I noticed," she whispered. "Someone has to." He let out a breath, the kind that carries days of unspoken fatigue. For the first time, In saw a crack in the armor he always wore, a moment of vulnerability that only she witnessed. For the next hour they moved around the arena with quiet efficiency. In prepared his wardrobe, adjusted his microphone, jabbed sweet from his forehead. Jungkook didn't speak much, but his presence shifted. No longer aloof, he occasionally offered small glances, fleeting smiles that were almost imperceptible to anyone else. The unspoken communication became a rhythm, her care, his acknowledgement. Every gesture, however minor, built a bridge between them. "It's strange," Jungkook thought, voice silent in his mind. "I've performed for thousands, but this small attention matters more than the applause." After rehearsal, In returned to her apartment, legs sore, fingers raw from hours of meticulous work. She sank onto her bed, reflecting on her own journey. Every rejection, every small fatigue, every night spent in doubt had led to this moment, the ability to make a difference, unseen, yet profoundly felt. "It's not about fame," she thought. "It's about understanding, about noticing, about caring quietly." Her thoughts drifted to Jungkook. The idol she had once admired from afar was no longer just a star on a screen. He was human, flawed, exhausted, yet resilient. And somehow their paths had crossed in this quiet, extraordinary way. In the following days, small rituals emerged. In would leave notes on his music sheets, simple reminders. "Rest, don't skip meals, you're doing amazing." Jungkook began to acknowledge them, silently, sometimes leaving a small token in return. A coffee cup with a note, a slight nod when she handed him a towel, a glance that lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary. These exchanges were quiet, almost invisible to the world. Yet in the empty backstage and under stage lights they became everything. Perhaps this is how trust begins in thought. Not with words, but with attention, care, and the courage to be present. And for Jungkook, who had rarely allowed anyone inside the walls of his perfection, the realization was profound. Someone sees me. Not the idol, not the image, just me. It was a beginning, fragile, delicate, but real.